Well, good morning and welcome to Primetime at the Bethel University Library. Primetime is a collaborative project between Friends of the BU Library, Campus Ministries, Faculty Development, and many other offices on campus. And the purpose of Friends of Primetime Library is to celebrate learning beyond the classroom through the experiences and accomplishments of Bethel faculty, students, and staff. I should say, for those of you who don't know me, I'm Garrett Fisher, the Associate Dean of Arts and Humanities, and currently acting Dean as well. Of course, one of my Bethel colleagues says acting like the Dean. Looking ahead, Tuesday, April 23rd is celebrating Shakespeare's birthday. And since I taught Shakespeare for a number of years, that's near and dear to me. I feel like he feels like he's a friend.
29 again?
What's that?
Is he 29 again?
Yeah, 29 again, yeah. A day-long celebration of fun and all things Shakespeare. And of course, we know that Shakespeare and fun are, in fact, synonymous. They don't call them plays for nothing. Beginning with a primetime program of sonnets, songs, and suites, and then various things during the day to help us celebrate more than 400 years for Will Shakespeare. I'm really pleased to be able to introduce Chris Moore and students this morning, students who participated in the Model United Nations last fall. It was the second year that Bethel has done that, and this was a new initiative that Professor Moore began a couple of years after he came to Bethel, and I think it's been a great opportunity for him and for the students, and I look forward to hearing about their experiences as Kenyan this past fall.
Thank you all for coming out, and thank you for this opportunity to share our experiences as being Kenyan ambassadors for 4 days in Chicago this past fall. We've sort of begun to subdivide our presentation today, so I'm going to speak a little bit in introduction of what Model UN is, and then I will turn this over to the students, and I'll be doing a little bit of interviewing of them, and they'll be talking about various components of what happened at the conference. Model UN is a program that's been around across the United States really since at least the early 1970s, and is essentially a collegiate, although sometimes high school, but in this case collegiate, interdisciplinary diplomacy and international politics and learning experience. It's hands-on. It's essentially a large-scale simulation. Imagine this. Imagine if you were an ambassador right now from a country other than the United States, and you were brought here to this group to consider an international response on behalf of the United Nations on, for example, human trafficking. How would you feel about human trafficking if you were from Thailand, or if you were from Japan, or if you were from Croatia? Or on nuclear proliferation, how would you feel if you were Pakistani, or Iranian, or North Korean, or the United States? Or international trade, or developing world, part of the developing world's infrastructure, putting in landlines or cell phone towers, building highways or information highways. These are the kinds of questions that our students deal with and prepare for and think through in Model United Nations. Functionally, the way the program works is various schools sign up to participate in a conference. And then they are assigned a country. Bethel University has been doing this for 2 years now, and we're looking forward to doing it next year as well. In our first year, we were assigned Sri Lanka. In our last year, we were assigned Kenya. And next year, we'll be playing Austria. On a personal note, I should mention that, in full disclosure, I did Model United Nations throughout my undergraduate years. And it is, frankly, I learned as much from Model United Nations as I did from many of my foreign policy classes. And it was a major factor in my decision to enter academia, so I was really excited to be able to share that with students here at Bethel as well. The conference we attended this last fall is the American Model United Nations Conference in Chicago. About 1,500 students attend from about 75 schools. They come for 4 days, and they come from places like University of Minnesota, University of Wisconsin, University of Arizona, Wheaton, Calvin, a number of Bethel's other peer institutions, and about 70 other schools as well. And to be honest with you, because the students are too humble to say this, they equip themselves incredibly well relative to those other schools. I'm sure they'll continue to do so in the future. So we have a couple of questions that the students are going to respond to. The first question we're posing, which Tom Monson and Emily Stroud are going to address, is how did we prepare to be Kenyan ambassadors? So, Tom.
I'm Tom, this is Emily, in case you guys get that confused. So anyways, after that's out of the way, I'm going to talk a little bit more about the administrative functions of like how exactly it looked like. As president of Model UN this year, I did a lot of the determining of when we had meetings, how many meetings we had, and how much research we did, and kind of what direction we were going to take in that regard. We ended up having about 4 to 5 meetings, particularly addressing things like learning how to do parliamentary procedure, learning how to vote on how you're going to vote about what you're going to then vote on, as some of you may know. We also had a number of sessions in which we came together as an entire club, about 14 or 15 of us, and discussed how exactly Kenya felt about a number of issues. Emily and I served on the same committee, and we looked a lot at, for example, threat of radioactive terrorism to Kenya, as well as how Kenya feels about biological warfare, how exactly the biological warfare conference and really different international policies like that was going to impact Kenya. Now, what this meant then was we had to coordinate a lot of what we did as a club, and this meant we had to communicate quite a bit. And so as a club, we essentially I essentially ended up having to really call a number of meetings together, about enough, as Dr. Moore would say, about a seminar sort of project length. In terms of how much research we did, and it was absolutely critical to be able to coordinate all of those, all of our research and all of our meetings, so that Kenya wasn't throwing out tons of different messages on how exactly we felt about nuclear proliferation or international water cooperation, so that all those things would line up. Emily's going to talk a little bit now about more the actual research and the things that we actually found.
Hello, thank you. So when we were each in our committees, there was 2 people to a committee, except for Shane, who we'll get to him later, he'll talk about that. But for our committees, where, say for the one committee was Tom and I, we would meet together and look at biological warfare, all of those different topics that would be discussed in our meetings. And not only did we have to do the research on where does Kenya stand on that, we had to look at different relations they might have with other countries, because those were going to be countries that we would seek out then in caucusing time during the conference. And we had to look at what treaties they had signed on to, how well they actually stayed with those treaties, looking at different laws and problems that the country might have. Because as we'll, I'm sure, discuss throughout this presentation, looking at it from the standpoint of Kenya was a lot different than the United States, especially as far as the biological warfare. As U.S. citizens, we have a very unique and different perspective on who should have those, how they should be regulated, all of that kind of stuff. And it's very different looking at a country such as Kenya, who is obviously in Africa, nowhere even close to here, and different problems that they were having. So each of the committees had to look at their topics. They had to see how their country was dealing with them, different groups that they were working with, and then we had to collaborate between our groups and keep each other updated, even throughout the conference, on what was happening in our committees, so we would know kind of we're all on the same page for Kenya.
So now you've had a chance to hear a little bit about how we prepared for this conference, and there was a great deal of preparation, and Tom's correct. The amount of work that each student put in is probably the equivalent of writing a significant term paper for a class, in addition to all of their other coursework. What we're going to turn to now are some highlights from the conference. We have a number of students who are going to be talking about different highlights. And so first up is Alex Hintz. He's going to talk about a particular unique highlight that he was able to experience during the conference. And then Matt Sundquist and Kaylee Eytchison will be talking about some highlights from their committees and the issues that they dealt with. And then last, Shane Sundholm is going to talk about what it's like to be a member of the International Press Corps at Model UN. So, Alex.
As Dr. Moore said, my name is Alex. I'm a sophomore here studying political science, and this is my second year with Model UN. I was on the Human Rights Council this year. But one of the highlights of the conference this year is we had a keynote speaker come in and his name was Ambassador Ibrahim Debashi from Libya. And he spoke about his experiences in the Libyan civil war. He was the first high official to defect from Libya, from the Gaddafi Libyan government to the rebel groups. And he spoke to the conference as a whole, so everyone, all of us got to hear him speak. And it was a really kind of cool experience. It was a little different from the rest of the conference because we left our roles as separate ambassadors just for a little bit to hear what it was like from an actual ambassador and some of the problems he dealt with, including threats to his life and the courage that it took to make that switch for what he felt was right. He told us about having to deal with protecting his family because many of the government officials who defected were targeted by assassins and their families were targeted. So that was a really cool experience that many of us got to go through. And Tommy, who just spoke, Tommy and I got to meet him afterwards, got a picture with him, got to shake his hand. So that was definitely one of the highlights of the conference for us.
My name is Matt. I was on the economics committee. As a business major, that was really interesting to me. A couple of highlights from the committee itself. It was really fun and interesting to talk about the issues from a Kenyan perspective. While I was doing research, one of them was how we develop infrastructure within landlocked developing nations. And while Kenya's on the coast, they only have about 4 to 6% of the population, like in the coastal regions of Kenya. So it was just interesting trying to think from the perspective of a Kenyan ambassador what we can do to not only like develop infrastructure with our nation, which is key for landlocked developing nations, but also what we can do to promote that development within those other East African nations around and what issues need to be focused on. And in doing some research, it was interesting to find that like China is investing a lot in Kenya right now to build that infrastructure because they have a stake in a lot of the resources that come from those landlocked developing nations right next to Kenya. And so as a Kenyan ambassador, I worked a lot with the Chinese ambassadors and also these East African ambassadors to try to figure out some of these issues. So that was really cool, just looking at some of these things going on in the world through the lens of another country. And as an American, like, it was a good experience to step out of like this mindset and step into another person's shoes and do things through that. Another thing that was really cool in our committee is we had a representative from the World Bank come in and talk to us about things that the World Bank does and some of the new developments that they've had in microloans and the new development of like an electronic currency that they're trying to use for that. So that was very cool just to be able to meet someone from the World Bank and hear about what the World Bank is trying to do to fight poverty throughout the world.
My name is Kaylee Eytchison, and perhaps a testament to the experience of Model UN is that I am an international relations major, which I was not last year. So I enjoyed my time.
It works.
It does. I enjoyed my time more than I thought that I would. But one of the highlights of my time in committee was, which I was in the general plenary, and the topics that we were addressing were providing natural disaster relief and preventing violence against women, which was very interesting we all were looking at the topics we were addressing through a different political lens, but to see societal and cultural kind of perspectives come to the surface more in that committee. But one of the highlights was that the resolution that my team had written passed. But overall, through that experience, I gained so much by the end of the week in the process of doing that. And not only was it extremely difficult to think about writing a resolution from the perspective of a Kenyan ambassador, but writing one that can be widely agreed upon, I was very naive about how hard that would be before coming into the conference. But it was an incredible learning experience, really one of the most valuable ones that I've had in my life. And it really changed the way that I view the world now. Having to try to look through a completely different perspective is an extremely beneficial thing for a long time afterward. So it was a great experience.
Hello, and thank you for coming. My name is Sundholm, and I'm studying political science here at Bethel. I say that because I think I was the only one not studying English Lit or journalism in that committee. So I was a part of the press corps, which is basically the International Press Delegation Political Conference. So we would go around, I think there was 6 or 7 of us. We would go around and attend each committee. We were assigned one committee per person, more or less. And then we would come back and report 3 or 4 times a day on how that committee is doing, progression, what the main issues are, those sorts of things. So I was assigned to the Economic Council. Basically, it's a think tank for the Economic Committee. They would look at the issues that the Economic Committee is dealing with, and then they would write recommendations to that committee, proposals to that committee for ways to address those issues. So that's my kind of main involvement. I would bring that back and then bring those reports back to the newspaper, in which we had a little technical difficulty in that I didn't figure out the computer system right away. So everyone else was publishing there, so mine didn't quite make it to the publishing process. So that's why a lot of mine didn't get in the newspaper, but that's from me just not being part of that. I have experience in that field. I think one of the main parts about my position that's different from everyone else is I had to be completely objective rather than subjective. Everyone else had to look through the lens as a Kenyan, whereas I had to kind of be completely aside from that. And at times that's very difficult when you're supposed to be just reporting facts, and I have a lot more respect for reporters now. And they come in news is advised from that. Because it's so hard to just report what facts are rather than putting your 2 cents in at the end. So that was my main takeaway. A couple of highlights. I was able to kind of walk around throughout the conference. A lot of the other delegates had to kind of be at their committee 24/7 basically, where I was able to kind of observe the conference as a whole. So that was cool, just kind of get the overall feel of it. And then we also had a private meeting, the 7 of us, who were with the press corps with Ambassador Eytchison. So that was really interesting. He came in, we each got to ask him several questions, and then one person reported on that. So that was my main act.
Thank you. Well, hopefully you've got a chance to hear from some of the highlights that some of our students experienced at the conference, ranging from the things they did in committee, the things that we did as a group, and some of the special events that occurred too. I'm going to act as the interviewer now for a moment, and in a moment here invite all of our participant students here to come up and reflect on a couple questions together, and even if they want to respond to a couple of things that they say, and ask you a couple of things, sort of just general reflections of the conference. If you'd all like to come up and we'll overwhelm the podium. So, come on in, guys. We'll make this cozy. So the first question I have for you is, some of you reflected on this specifically, but I'd like to ask you now to sort of respond and think about this more generally. What will you take away from, as a couple of you said, take yourself out of an American perspective politically and act as a Kenyan? What will you take away from that?
As in my experience, what I also compete on the forensics team, and I honestly have a lot of experience looking at international politics, international news, and the Model United Nations allowed a chance for me to understand the human face of what it means to function internationally. Now, as president of the club, I got to choose a little bit of the direction that we were going to take after the conference. And part of the way that I went was I met a lady by the name of Jill Anderson. She's a representative of a group called Solidarity Movement for a New Ethiopia. Now, in Ethiopia, there happens to be a series of mass killings that have been taking place in a little niche by where South Sudan and Sudan kind of split out. And to give a little context, in the Boston bombing, there were 3 deaths and roughly 180 injuries. In that area, in a single day in 2003, about 350 people were killed. I had a chance then to make contact with a guy named Obang Methos, who's the international leader of this organization, and he knew all of them that died. And he had a chance, actually, on very short notice, to come to Bethel and talk to a few of us about what it means to interact as a Christian, as an individual, in the international in the international system, if we're not necessarily going to go abroad and actually do those things. And what struck me that he said is to have empathy, to care about the people that are around us on the local area. And what I took away from it is that those people there have faces that the people in Kenya that we are representing have faces that there are people that we are to care about as Christians. We focus on the ministry aspect of this, and understanding what we as Christians are called to do in the international system in a globalized world. If we're not necessarily going to go do missions, what does that look like? And I think a big step towards that is not only awareness, but actually developing a more humanitarian, a more human-faced understanding of that. And I think that's what I personally am going to take away from this experience.
Thanks, Tom. Others, things that you reflect on from being Kenyan for 4 days?
One thing that I really took away from the conference was, I guess, more skills in dealing with conflicts. In the committees, there's 70-ish countries, all with different perspectives on what they want on the issue, and everyone is trying to enforce their will on whatever resolution we're writing. So we got a lot of practice with kind of navigating through those conflicts, and I think what made it even harder was that many times, as I'm representing a Kenyan, I'm arguing for views that, as an American, I wouldn't hold. So I think just that added step in those conflicts, it gave me a lot of experience in, I think, just dealing with situations like that. So that's one thing I'm going to take away.
I also think that it made me a lot more aware of the American lens that I have now. And I studied abroad in Jordan and Israel this past January, and the experience that I had with Model UN making me more aware of the perspective that I did have coming into that really did change the way that I viewed that culture in context when I was there. And I think really helped me to ask more of the right questions of the people that I was there with, and to really learn the most of that experience, knowing the perspective that I absolutely have.
I think going off of what Kaylee said, I don't know for myself also, the traveling aspect, it was a lot more different in this simulation rather than just traveling and studying in a country for a semester, or the Europe trip where we just traveled around everywhere for 3 days at a time. And even if you're staying in one place for a long time, you really get to know the people, the culture, the feel of the society that you're in, and that's a great experience and something that you always take with you. But one thing that was different about this conference and simulation that I found very different was looking at it from the perspective of ambassadors and those who feel responsible for those people, for those communities that other people are living in and enjoying. And so taking yourself out of the U.S. perspective and putting yourself as being accountable for those lives and the kind of lifestyle that they can enjoy. And so it was very humbling, kind of, to look at that perspective also.
Not being a Kenyan delegate, I kind of got the opportunity to see, as I was saying before, the opportunity to see the conference as a whole. And from doing that, I think if you view the conference a lot more differently than you would if you're actually in the action at a specific committee. Last year, I was on a committee, and you tend to focus on like your issue so much more than you would, if you're standing outside the process. So I really appreciate that opportunity to just kind of sit back and and take a holistic approach to the conference, or even a specific committee in general.
And then I think the big takeaway for me was just realizing how important it is to look at issues from like every single perspective. To try to understand where other people are coming from on them. Like in our committee, if I didn't understand the other perspectives or the other country's interests, like there's no way that we would ever be able to come to an agreement. There's no way we would ever be able to like talk through the issues in a meaningful way that could ultimately maybe come to a compromise or something that benefits both parties. And that was a good perspective for me to gain. That like that's important in everyday life, just like everything that we do. It also was interesting. I'd never, since I'm a business major, so I didn't know parliamentary procedure before and didn't really know a ton about like how the government or the United Nations actually function. So that was an interesting thing to learn, and then just to realize like political process is long, and well, that's good because then you have the discussion, and it's not just like a quick spur-of-the-moment decision made. Like it's good to have all voices heard so that you can come to the best outcome. So that was a good takeaway for me as well.
Thank you all very much. We'll wrap up with this. So is there anything that we haven't talked about today that you'd like to say that was part of your reflection on, or something that you'll take away from the conference more generally? Or is there something you'd like to say about this program to potential viewers that might be trying to recruit for next year, that sort of thing?
I have one point. As I said, I was the only poli-sci student in the press corps, so I think looking at other, I think a good thing the club needs is a focus on bringing other majors into modern navigation. It's not just poli-sci or IR students. If you look at other schools, they have history majors, they have English majors, they have reconciliation majors, they have all sorts of different fields represented in their school. And I think that's something the team in general could come way more prepared if we have a broader focus.
Going off of that, I think that's also very important because even for someone, I didn't actually even know about Model UN until I asked Dr. Moore about an international relations club here on campus that might be of interest, and I was more doing that just because of my major. But within the conference, and as you heard, we were all on different kinds of committees and they have different focuses. So even someone who might be an environmental science focus, there's bound to be a committee that's discussing those topics, and to get that international perspective on a topic you're interested in, I think is highly beneficial, even if you never travel to another country. Knowing those and being able to coordinate with different perspectives on that topic is crucial, I think, especially in this world when we're so connected.
Additionally, as we move beyond the conference as a club, and having events and choosing what we're going to focus on for the rest of the year, is sometimes it's a blessing, but it's also sometimes a little difficult to get a direction because the field's so wide open. Being able to branch across fields of study, different schools of thought, and being able to come together so that there's actually multiple perspectives, which is about what Model UN is all about, would be absolutely great. Being able to partner with different departments, different clubs and organizations on campus would be wonderful, and I think all the different organizations and groups on campus would be able to benefit a lot more from that kind of synergy, that kind of communication, and I think Model UN would love to be a part of something like that, and I think we should probably move to questions by now.
Pretty close here. There's been a motion to adjourn. Anyone else have any final reflections before we entertain any questions from the audience? All right, well, before we turn over to questions, please, would you please join me in thanking these students for their time? Any questions?
I'm wondering, you talked about how the experience affected your perspective on being an American and perspective on being a Kenyan. I'm wondering how it affected your view of the actual UN.
Well, I come from a family where we often speak of the UN as a rather cumbersome process, that it gets a little diluted, and I think I understand a little bit more of why. Trying to get about 300 people from almost every single country out there to agree on a single resolution is a difficult process. And it also gave me a lot more insight into how talented real ambassadors actually need to be, and how much energy those guys have to have, because each of those individuals has to function under a lot more stress than we did, and probably for a lot more hours. We were going about between 12 to 14 hours a day, and with not nearly as much stress as would be the case if we were affecting real lives and representing a country. And so I think it gave me a lot more insight into how much is at stake and what that ends up doing to both direct and constrain the international process to represent really countries across the world.
Anyone want to take part of that question? Any other questions?
A couple, I guess. First of all, what is Chris more like as a driver? Does he save the music? Does he make you listen to?
That last question was most indicting, actually.
Oh, maybe I should stop there. Watch this transcript. But if you care, another question. What role do domestic politics have? You talk about international relations, but you're also representing a country that has a certain kind of political system that's been turbulent in recent years. I don't know exactly how this lined up with the recent elections, but was that part of your putting yourself in those shoes? Where in some ways are you representing a certain kind of government? Are you supposed to be attentive to the issues back home in Kenya as well, or is that making it too complicated to bring that up as well?
Yeah, I can say a little bit about that. And the example I'm going to use is actually from last year's conference when we were in Sri Lanka, because I think it's makes a little bit more sense, or it's a little more real. Sri Lanka just came out of a huge civil war with the Liberation Tigers, kind of guerrilla warfare terrorist group in northern Sri Lanka. And what's interesting is that domestic politics, the Sri Lankan government is strongly opposed to terrorism and strongly upholds human rights when countering terrorism. But at the same time, their actions didn't show that in the Civil War. So I think, to answer your question about upholding domestic politics, what we had to do was go with the government in what the government said and try and kind of shoo away some of the actions that was actually taking place in the country. And I guess you can ask yourself if that's a moral thing for an ambassador to do. What should an ambassador do? Represent the people that represent the country. But I think what we had to remember was that we're employed by the government, and we are members of the government. So I think that's another very interesting aspect of the conference of ambassadors, and it kind of ties back with Ambassador Debashi, because he chose and that he couldn't represent the government anymore, and that he had to represent the people. So.
Yeah. Additionally, with representing Kenya, it shaped a lot of our policy agenda, what we cared about more. And I know in the committee that Emily and I were in, everyone else seemed to want to talk about radioactive terrorism, the threat of nuke war, and you know, Kenya actually cares a lot more about biological warfare and securing that. And so we had recently, just before the conference, escalated the security at our national laboratories to national security level 2 on a scale of 3. And so we cared a lot more about biological warfare than the threat of nuke war, because the threat of biological warfare was actually a much more real danger for us. Additionally, we are bordered by a couple of relatively chaotic countries. You know, Somalia and Sudan are in our region, and having to deal with that shaped a lot of our what we wanted to focus on in terms of security, in terms of how we were going to deal with that. You know, Al-Shabaab is an issue over in Somalia, and there's a civil war taking place just you know, a little ways away from us, and so we cared a lot about border security, security in dealing with transportation, and so we actually wanted the way that our domestic policies and regional politics were playing out is we ended up caring a lot more about transportation of chemical weapons, as well as kind of border security for our countries, keeping things secure.
If I can just add one more quick thing too, although Bethel was represented in about 7 committees at the American Model Nations Conference, there are about actually 15 committees running, and that your representation depends on representation of the real UN at any given time. And one of the committees we did not sit on is the Security Council, which is the 5 permanent members of the Security Council plus a 10-member rotating membership. However, the Security Council can talk about any issues that it wishes, and one of the options and one of the potentials was that they might address South Sudan. And if that was the case, it's entirely possible that someone from our committee could have been essentially demanded, or a command performance to come before that committee and then represent the Kenyan government in that committee, should that committee's direction take that way. That committee also has a crisis scenario, so they will get the college students out of bed at 3 in the morning after they've been there for an hour or so, and then make them come back down and deal with some sort of developing issue somewhere in the world. And so I'm hopeful at some point we'll get a chance to experience that as well. But that was a part of our agenda this year. But that could have involved us, given the volatility of the part of the world that we were representing.
You basically talked about how it's different to have perspective from another country than to have an American. Are there any specific things, or even views about that you reflected on as an American, how you might have a different perspective even though you're coming from America, about, or how people view America as you were Kenyan representatives?
All right. Well, I know that as Kenya, we actually, you know, it was nice to work with like the United States on issues if they wanted to, but they were not actually our major, like, we really want to work with the United States. We cared a lot about what China had to say, was a big connection there. And usually if you're in the United States, you don't care so much to do all of your bilateral agreements through China. You want to work with other people in addition to China. Additionally, I now realize just kind of like how much sway the United States has. Kenya does not have that quite as much. We are not as big of a player. Kenya was not as big of a player in the international arena as the United States was, and I think to kind of be knocked down the totem pole like that by a few notches, you know, knowing what the United States is capable of versus what, you know, Sri Lanka 2 years ago and what now Kenya was used to, very different, and then it also kind of reshaped what exactly I thought should go on the public agenda. You know, in my own committee, that came down to, like, if I was America, I want to talk about nuclear terrorism. If I'm Kenya, I care a lot more about biological warfare, and that was kind of the big difference in my committee.
One thing kind of going off of that, when working in our committee, we were trying to work on a resolution to pass that would help Kenya and some of the East African countries in terms of infrastructure. And about 15 countries wouldn't sign on to it unless China's name was on there. So we had to, like, really lobby China and have their interests involved. which was like, we were kind of like, we couldn't do anything until we got them onto it. So kind of like Tom was saying, you don't have as much power and you don't have as much sway over other nations unless you kind of like couple with one of the big countries that does have that political sway.
I will just add, just to brag on these folks a little bit, as an advisor, I got the opportunity to sort of wander, like Shane did, from committee to committee, and oversee everything that was happening. And it was fun to walk by groups of delegates from schools that I didn't know, say, well, we need to find out what Kenya thinks about this, and then wander off. Good, yes, yes you do. It was fun to hear those kinds of things, too. Well, I think we're nearly at the end of our time here, so again, would you join me in thanking the students for their participation? And thank you for your attendance today, too.